I had been doing business abroad for many years. Hearing that Troy was about to get engaged, I flew back overnight. That night, my son, Troy Malone, posted a group of photos where we ate together on Facebook. And the caption read, "You have been by my side all the way. Thank you, the most important woman in my life." Unexpectedly, my Siena Hunt, mistook me for Siena's mistress. On the day of the engagement banquet, Siena led a group of her friends and blocked me at a beauty salon. You shameless woman. How dare you seduce Troy? I will make you unable to seduce a man for the rest of your life. Girls, sew her part down there up. If anything happens, I'll take the blame. Siena violently beat me up at the beauty salon before taking me to the engagement banquet. Today, I will let you see who Troy likes. Siena stepped on my face with one foot, humiliating me so much, and all the guests around burst into laughter. Just as Siena was enjoying her triumph and beating me up, Troy finally arrived. I watched Troy on the edge of dying. The engagement banquet may end now. Troy was about to get engaged to his girlfriend, whom he had been dating for 2 years. Hearing this, I was overjoyed and thought that the Malone family would have a successor soon. Then I canceled all my work in Oreo and bought the earliest flight ticket. I rushed back to Lautnerd overnight. Tonight, I reunited with Troy at a restaurant. Then he posted a photo of our reunion on Facebook. He added a caption which read, "Thank you, the most important woman in my life." Since Troy's father passed away, all the business had been on my shoulders. I had no choice but to fly to Oreo. It had been many years since I last saw Troy. Upon knowing the news that Troy was about to get engaged, I prepared myself seriously. I planned to face my in-laws in my most stunning look, so as not to embarrass Troy. That night, Troy and Siena had a big fight. I asked Troy what had happened. After all, tomorrow was their engagement banquet. Troy angrily told me, "Siena said she wants to beat up my mistress. She is so insensible. How could I, Troy Malone, have a mistress?" I rarely interfered or inquired about Troy's matters or his relationships. But I advised Troy, getting married is a matter between two people. You must be loyal before getting married. If I find out that you dare to bully Siena in the future, I will teach you a lesson. I don't care if you indeed have another woman in secret. Since you chose Siena, cut off all ties with other women. Troy was sweating profusely for my scolding. I didn't expect that the night before their engagement banquet, Troy and Siena would have a big fight because of a mistress. I secretly made up my mind that I would personally explain the misunderstanding between Troy and Siena at the engagement banquet tomorrow. I bought a villa worth $17 million as a meeting gift for Siena as her mother-in-law. The day before the engagement banquet, I carefully dressed myself and went to a beauty salon to do light makeup. I intended to show up with my best look before attending the banquet tonight. Just when everything was ready, I was about to attend Troy's engagement banquet. I saw Siena leading a group of girls rushing into the beauty salon angrily. I thought to myself, what a small world. I was about to get up and greet Siena to meet her in advance. Looking at me fiercely, Siena walked towards me with his girlfriends. Everyone on the scene, who was surprised, gazed at us. Siena slapped me in the face, ruining my carefully applied makeup. The burning pain on my face made me feel dizzy on the spot. The situation was chaotic. Siena grabbed my hair and cursed at me loudly. "You are such a B***. Do you think I can't find you hiding here without Troy being honest with me?" Chapter 2. Her sudden slap and the overwhelming insults made me feel both painful and embarrassed. All the guests in the beauty salon were eagerly watching such a drama where a legitimate wife beat up a mistress. She seems quite well-mannered with her words and actions. Unexpectedly, at this age, she would seduce other men and do such shameless things. Everything can indeed happen in this vast world. Everyone's whisper rang out in my ears. I endured the pain on my face and explained, "Siena, you misunderstood. I am Troy's." Siena didn't give me a chance to speak. She grabbed my hair and pushed me down to the ground. Several of her friends swarmed up, punching and kicking me. The intense pain almost numbed my whole body. Siena scolded me while beating me, "You slut. You seduce my husband, and you deny that you're not a mistress. If you're not his mistress, how do you know my name? It is funny. I didn't expect you to hide so well. Let me tell you, a lowly woman like you will never be able to rise high and gain glory. Don't ever think about snatching my husband from me in your whole life. When I marry into a wealthy family, I will sell you to a brothel, let you serve thousands of men, and be taken advantage of by tens of thousands. Amid such offensive insults, I kept explaining, Siena, I am not Troy's mistress. If you don't believe me, call Troy and ask him. Before, Troy had shown me photos and videos of him and Siena together. In the photos, Siena appeared as a gentle, considerate, and well-educated girl. But now I realized that I was wrong. I didn't expect Siena to be so sarcastic and mean. She wouldn't give me any chance to explain. She pulled my hair apart and crazily dragged me around. Suffering from excruciating pain, I screamed over and over again. Well, Troy, you're calling him so intimately. A cheap whore is always a cheap whore. Now you're still verbally stubborn. Siena looked gloomy, saying, Humph. What a stubborn woman. You sluts who serve as mistresses for others will never admit that you are mistresses even in death. Later, I will take you to the engagement banquet and personally ask Troy whether you or I serve him better. With me around, you will never be able to marry into a wealthy family in your whole life. At best, you are just second-used goods that Troy will kick away after getting tired of you. Siena's sharp curses kept stimulating my nerves. I dared not imagine what would happen if Troy married a woman like Siena in the future. Before this, I was full of expectations. I even bought a post-marriage villa for them. Humph. Let's kill this slut. Take off her clothes. Today, I want to see if this trash has any shame. Siena's best friend's eyes flickered with fierceness. They stared at me intently. 4 or 5 people were crazily pulling my hair and beating me on the ground. Cooperating with another woman, Siena was tearing off the buttons on my long dress. For a moment, I was covered in blood, and my body was exposed. Everyone looked at me gloatingly as if it no longer mattered to them whether I was a mistress or not. The scene of me being humiliated and beaten became a great show in their eyes. They watched it with excitement. I desperately covered my chest. There were so many of them. I was simply no match for them. The intense pain almost made me faint. In a daze, I even saw Siena taking out her cell phone and starting to take pictures of me. You slut. Your reputation is to be ruined. Siena's several close friends were about to tear off my remaining tattered clothes. I shouted out, Siena, I am Troy's mother. Chapter 3. Siena was stunned. I thought she would call Troy and personally verify my identity. She laughed recklessly, saying, You a vixen. Do you deserve to be Troy's mother and my mother-in-law? You are just a mistress who can only serve others for a lifetime and live in darkness. You are nobody but a good-looking slut. Troy will never like you. If you are Troy's mother, then the whole world would be turned upside down. Siena sneered, her face showing madness. Taking out her cell phone, she constantly took pictures of me. What made me desperate was that there were many employees and customers in this beauty salon, but no one stopped them. Everyone was holding their cell phones and taking random pictures of me. Did you see it? This is the end for someone who becomes a mistress for others. The legitimate wife caught her in a beauty salon. The mistress deserves to die. Take off all her clothes and let her be disgraced. She can never turn her life around. The guests added fuel to the fire. Everything around me was in chaos. I felt like my face was covered in blood. I was going to be beaten to death by them. In the chaos, I seemed to hear Siena's best friend, who was uncertain about the situation, asking quietly, Siena, should we confirm it? What if she is? Before she finished speaking, Siena waved her hand to interrupt her. Looking at me lying in a pool of blood with disheveled hair, she said with a sneer, Humph. My mother-in-law is still in Oreo. She said she will only arrive today. I did tell Troy that I would attend their engagement banquet on that exact day. By the way, I would formally meet Siena. I was very happy. I would surely attend Troy's wedding regardless of what happened. So I arrived early last night. I had a meal with Troy at a restaurant near the airport. Now I knew that Siena was referring to the photo Troy posted on Facebook last night. I was the mistress that Siena wanted to beat up. Amid the tearing and fighting, Siena tore my long dress down to my waist. Her friend restrained my both friends. Siena tore off my remaining underwear. There was a burst of commotion around. Well, you have the guts to be a mistress, but you don't dare to let others see your private part? Indeed, you have got something. I didn't expect you to maintain yourself so well. Everyone picked up their cell phones and took pictures of me fervently. I screamed miserably, struggling with all my strength, but her friends firmly pressed me to the ground. Take her hands away to reveal her chest. I want to post the photos online so that netizens across the country can see this slut's body. Siena almost lost her mind. The sound of her laughter echoed through the beauty salon. I fell into a pool of blood, almost dying. Until now, I finally confirmed that Troy had never shown Siena my photo. Siena, does she seem to be dying? Shall we continue? Seeing my condition, Siena's best friends were a little scared. Siena sneered, saying, "You act so amazingly. When you were being Troy's mistress, did you ever think about your outcome some other day? It's okay. As long as I marry Troy and marry into a wealthy family, Troy and my mother-in-law will help me handle it no matter what happens." After finishing her words, Siena waved her hand and said, "Drag her into the car." Then she looked down at her wristwatch, and her face changed. She hurriedly said, "Hurry up. Let's go to the annulment banquet venue." Chapter 3. Siena was stunned. I thought she would call Troy and personally verify my identity. She laughed recklessly, saying, "You a vixen. Do you deserve to be Troy's mother and my mother-in-law? You are just a mistress who can only serve others for a lifetime and live in darkness. You are nobody but a good-looking slut. Troy will never like you. If you are Troy's mother, then the whole world would be turned upside down." Siena sneered, her face showing madness. Taking out her cell phone, she constantly took pictures of me. What made me desperate was that there were many employees and customers in this beauty salon, but no one stopped them. Everyone was holding their cell phones and taking random pictures of me. Did you see it? This is the end for someone who becomes a mistress for others. The legitimate wife caught her in a beauty salon. The mistress deserves to die. Take off all her clothes and let her be disgraced. She can never turn her life around. The guests added fuel to the fire. Everything around me was in chaos. I felt like my face was covered in blood. I was going to be beaten to death by them. In the chaos, I seemed to hear Siena's best friend, who was uncertain about the situation, asking quietly, "Siena, should we confirm it? What if she is?" Before she finished speaking, Siena waved her hand to interrupt her. Looking at me lying in a pool of blood with disheveled hair, she said with a sneer, "Humph. My mother-in-law is still in Oreo. She said she will only arrive today." I did tell Troy that I would attend their engagement banquet on that exact day. By the way, I would formally meet Siena. I was very happy. I would surely attend Troy's wedding regardless of what happened. So, I arrived early last night. I had a meal with Troy at a restaurant near the airport. Now I knew that Siena was referring to the photo Troy posted on Facebook last night. I was the mistress that Siena wanted to beat up. Amid the tearing and fighting, Siena tore my long dress down to my waist. Her friend restrained my both friends. Siena tore off my remaining underwear. There was a burst of commotion around. Well, you have the guts to be a mistress, but you don't dare to let others see your private part? Indeed, you have got something. I didn't expect you to maintain yourself so well. Everyone picked up their cell phones and took pictures of me fervently. I screamed miserably, struggling with all my strength, but her friends firmly pressed me to the ground. Take her hands away to reveal her chest. I want to post the photos online so that netizens across the country can see this slut's body. Siena almost lost her mind. The sound of her laughter echoed through the beauty salon. I fell into a pool of blood, almost dying. Until now, I finally confirmed that Troy had never shown Siena my photo. Siena, does she seem to be dying? Shall we continue? Seeing my condition, Siena's best friends were a little scared. Siena sneered, saying, "You act so amazingly. When you were being Troy's mistress, did you ever think about your outcome some other day? It's okay. As long as I marry Troy and marry into a wealthy family, Troy and my mother-in-law will help me handle it no matter what happens." After finishing her words, Siena waved her hand and said, "Drag her into the car." Then she looked down at her wristwatch, and her face changed. She hurriedly said, "Hurry up. Let's go to the engagement banquet venue. My mother-in-law should be there soon." Chapter 4. Troy said he wants to formally introduce me to my mother-in-law today. After Siena finished speaking, her group of girlfriends started pulling my hair and walked out of the beauty salon. Before leaving, she raised her voice and said to the boss of the beauty salon, "Regarding all the losses caused by us here today, go to the finance department of the Malone Group to be reimbursed for it. Tell them that it is Troy's wife who sent you there." At the words, the boss of the beauty salon's face changed. He quickly showed a pleasing smile and said, "So it's Mrs. Malone. Don't worry. We won't call the police about what happened here today." Siena was proud and satisfied. I, who had almost lost all my strength, was humiliated, allowing them to drag me out of the beauty salon. Passers-by were pointing at me and whispering. Siena stood with her hands on her hips and cursed, "I'm teaching the mistress a lesson. It's none of your business." Someone couldn't bear it anymore. A woman stepped forward to persuade. "Miss, even if she indeed is the mistress, you can't beat her up like this. Her face is covered in blood, and you tore her dress. Get a piece of clothing to cover her up. Every part of hers has been exposed. We all have our dignity. Moreover, what you are doing is illegal." Siena wouldn't listen at all. She sneered at the woman who spoke up, saying sarcastically, "Well, you are so eager to come forward to defend this slut. The way I see it, you're just like her. You are a shameless mistress, right? And I am rich. My husband is the chairman of the Malone Group. Even if I kill someone, I can afford the compensation." The woman angrily glanced at Siena. I didn't expect Siena, who looked gentle and weak, to speak so viciously. Finally, Siena and her close friends drove and dragged to the lobby of the hotel where the engagement banquet was held. Today was the engagement banquet. Both families had invited many guests from each side. There were dozens of them. I was dragged in. The guests on Siena's side and various relatives all looked at me in unison. "Siena, is she the mistress you mentioned?" Siena's parents stood up and looked at me with resentment on their faces. Siena nodded, saying, "Yes, that's right. She is the woman in the photo my husband posted on his Facebook timeline last night. I couldn't have mistaken her." Hearing Siena's confirmation, her mother, Elena Newman, ran straight to me and started slapping my scalp furiously. "Bitch. How dare you steal my daughter's man? Today, I'll kill you." The continuous blows left me too weak to even speak. I even wondered if they would beat me to death here today. Kill her. Only my daughter can marry into a wealthy family. Elena called her friends over. The people from her side surrounded me again. In the end, Elena said to Siena, "Siena, bring a knife over. I want to ruin her face. I'll see how you seduce other men in the future." Siena handed a knife to Elena. Everyone was looking at me. As I endured heart-wrenching pain, Elena fiercely slashed my face with the knife. "Ouch!" I screamed hoarsely. The overwhelming pain made me wake up from the daze. At this time, Siena's cell phone rang. She arrogantly turned on the speakerphone, and Troy's voice rang out. "Siena, has my mom arrived? What happened over your side? Why is it so noisy?" Siena sneered, saying, "I'm teaching your mistress a lesson." Troy was stunned. "My mistress? What are you talking about?" Chapter 5. After a brief silence, Troy said in a deep voice, "Siena, let me tell you again, I have never had any mistress. Today is our engagement banquet. You better not make a scene and challenge my bottom line. My mother will be here soon. It is the first time you have met my mother today. Go out and pick her up." Elena left several bloodstains on my face. I was tortured by them and felt like I would rather die. I was weak and on the verge of dying. Blood was everywhere. Relatives of Siena's family were constantly adding fuel and vinegar, clamoring to strip off all the remaining clothes on me. Elena wiped the sweat off her face and hurriedly instructed Siena. Siena, go outside and wait for your mother-in-law. She is the CEO of the Malone Group. Even Troy does as she says. We must leave a good impression on Mrs. Berg. Siena nodded, tidied up her appearance, and stood outside the hall. I was disfigured. They dragged me to a corner. Even though they had tortured me like this, they were not planning to let me go. All the relatives on Siena's side were here today. They gathered around Elena and kept congratulating her. Since Siena was young, I could tell that she was destined for greatness. I didn't expect that I was right. She married into a wealthy family. Yes, Elena, your family will be in the upper class in the future. Don't worry. When the time comes, we'll make a phone call to each other often and help each other. It is the Malone Group. Wow. I heard that it's a company with great fortune. Siena is indeed favored by luck. The flattery and pleasing words rang out one after another. Elena laughed triumphantly, saying, Of course, Siena is good-looking. She is more than enough to match Troy. When the mother-in-law comes later, you must not embarrass our family. She is a very important person. Don't take away the leftover food. Anyway, we will be rich in the future, and missing a meal or two doesn't matter to us. Everyone nodded happily. Suddenly, someone noticed a red notebook in my bag. What is that? Elena acted quickly. She quickly bent down, picked up my bag, and took out a red notebook from it. Chapter 6. It was the real estate property certificate of the mansion that I prepared to give to Troy and Siena as a gift at the engagement banquet today. They unfolded it. Elena curiously asked, Blake Bay real estate property certificate? Someone exclaimed, Blake Bay? I seem to have heard of it. The houses there are very expensive, and it is said that they are all large villas. Elena immediately got angry. She stared at me with wide eyes and cursed at me as loudly as she could. Great. I didn't expect you, this bitch, to get a villa from Troy. Don't even think about it. She finished her words. In front of everyone, Elena tore the certificate of the villa into pieces and smashed it on me. After doing all this, Elena didn't let go of her resentment. She poured out everything in my bag, including a photo of me and Troy's father, Jack Malone, and a golden ring. Since my husband, Jack Malone, passed away, I had always carried our photos with me. The golden ring was a family heirloom from my mother-in-law when Jack and I got married. At that time, my mother-in-law held my hand solemnly and told me to pass it on to Troy or my daughter when they got married. This golden ring was worth a lot. Chapter 6. It was the real estate property certificate of the mansion that I prepared to give to Troy and Siena as a gift at the engagement banquet today. They unfolded it. Elena curiously asked, Blake Bay real estate property certificate? Someone exclaimed, Blake Bay? I seem to have heard of it. The houses there are very expensive, and it is said that they are all large villas. Elena immediately got angry. She stared at me with wide eyes and cursed at me as loudly as she could. Great. I didn't expect you, this bitch, to get a villa from Troy. Don't even think about it. She finished her words. In front of everyone, Elena tore the certificate of the villa into pieces and smashed it on me. After doing all this, Elena didn't let go of her resentment. She poured out everything in my bag, including a photo of me and Troy's father, Jack Malone, and a golden ring. Since my husband, Jack Malone, passed away, I had always carried our photos with me. The golden ring was a family heirloom from my mother-in-law when Jack and I got married. At that time, my mother-in-law held my hand solemnly and told me to pass it on to Troy or my daughter when they got married. This golden ring was worth a lot. It was a treasure of a time-honored jewelry brand. Jack told me that when my mother-in-law bought it, she spent more than $1,000. Since it had been passed down to now, it mattered more than an heirloom. To the Malone family, it was more a symbol of passing on the family line and continuing the family's prosperity than an item of great monetary value. Humph. It seems that Troy has been captivated by you. Not only did he give you a villa in Blake Bay, but he also gave you a golden ring. This time, I summoned up all my strength. I desperately tried to snatch the golden ring from Elena's hand, saying, "Give it back to me quickly." I pleaded bitterly, but I was a step too late. Elena, right in front of me, fiercely threw the golden ring to the ground, instantly shattering it into pieces. "No!" I let out a scream and sat on the ground in a daze, staring blankly at the fragments of the golden ring. Elena indifferently tore up the photo of Jack and me, scolding me. "Not only did you seduce Troy, but you also seduced other men? If Troy finds out, he will not let you go." I felt hopeless. Like mother, like daughter. I finally knew how Siena had such a personality. When I first found out that Troy had a girlfriend, I was happy for him. I repeatedly reminded him to take good care of the girl. Now I finally regretted it. If I had known that Siena's family was like this, I would never have allowed Troy to get close to them. "All right, let's take her to the hospital first in case something happens." Someone couldn't bear to watch. He came over and reminded them not to make a scene. Elena looked at him, widened her eyes, and cursed at him. "It's none of your business, okay? I'm teaching this bitch a lesson. What qualifications do you have to meddle? Or is it that you can't bear to see it and have started to pity and cherish her?" Today, I wanted to watch as Siena and Troy get engaged. The man's face turned livid. Given that Elena's daughter, Siena, was about to become the boss lady of the Malone group, he didn't dare to say anything more. Seeing the man retreat, Elena didn't hold back at all. Instead, she became even more arrogant and said, "Everyone, take a good look. This is the end of someone who tries to steal my daughter's husband." Outside the hotel lobby, Siena, who had been waiting for a long time, walked in. She looked puzzled and said, "It's strange. Didn't Troy say that my mother-in-law was always punctual and would arrive at 5 p.m.? It's almost 6 p.m. now, and I haven't seen my mother-in-law." Speaking of this, Siena vented all her anger on me. She kicked my lower abdomen fiercely. "It's all your fault. You slut. It must be my mother-in-law who knows that you seduced Troy and feels embarrassed, so she doesn't want to show up here. Are you trying to steal my man? Drag her into the bathroom. I want to sew up her vagina so that she can never seduce a man again." I was dragged into a bathroom by Elena and Siena's best friend. I was despondent. I didn't even have a chance to call the police or make a phone call to Troy. Chapter 7 in the bathroom. I was resigned without any strength to resist. Siena found a waiter and asked for a needle and thread. I thought they were just scaring me, but I was wrong. They took off my clothes. Siena personally used needle and thread to sew up my vagina. The whole process lasted for more than half an hour. I was tortured to death. In the end, I was wearing only thin underwear. Siena threw me in the lobby. Everyone was mindful of her identity and dared not speak up. Everyone looked at me covered in blood in silence. Siena's best friend whispered, "She is so miserable." Just now in the bathroom, they didn't participate, but they stood aside and gleefully filmed the whole scene. This is the end of being a mistress. She is physically healthy. Why did she become a mistress? Look at her appearance. Is she qualified to snatch a husband from Siena? She deserves it. Siena became anxious. She kept looking towards the door as if waiting eagerly for her mother-in-law, who never arrived. "Don't worry, Siena. Today is your engagement banquet with Troy. Mrs. Berg will show up. No matter what the consequences are, Mrs. Berg and Troy will handle it." Elena spoke while staring at me fiercely. Siena nodded, saying, "I can't wait to see my mother-in-law. And per Troy, my mother-in-law seems to have a valuable gift for me today. It is something like a family heirloom." Elena's breathing became rapid. What Troy's mother would gift her must be extraordinary. I was about to collapse. Under the successive insults, I was about to faint. There came a noise from outside. "Troy is here." In a daze, I saw Troy wearing a straight suit and walking into the engagement banquet hall with strides. My good son-in-law. "Honey." The attention of Siena and her family moved away from me. Everyone went to greet Troy.
Troy came in.
He asked Siena, "Siena, where's my mom? Did you get her?" Siena was stunned. Then she shook her head and said, I don't know. Logically speaking, she should have arrived early. Forget it. Let's wait. She will show up. Elena and her relatives surrounded Troy. Troy, after you marry Siena, we will be a family. Troy, you must treat Siena well. She is a good girl. Be careful of those women with ultimate motives. Don't let them infect you with any diseases. There are many cheap women nowadays. Seeing that you are rich, they stick to you. I saw Troy ignoring Siena's relatives. He walked in alone. Finally, he found me lying on the ground, barely breathing. Troy frowned and asked, Who is she? At this moment, I was lying on the ground with disheveled hair and no clothes on. Even he didn't recognize me. Siena sneered, saying, Who else could it be? Of course, it's that vixen by your side. Since you cherish her, I will teach her a lesson so that she won't dare to seduce men again in the future. Troy said in a deep voice, Enough. Let me say it again. I have never had any other woman outside. Did you get the wrong person? Chapter 8. Troy looked resolute. Siena, Elena, and her few close friends were all diffident. If we made a mistake, let it be. We will compensate her with some money afterward. Siena didn't realize any of her mistakes. Arrogantly, she raised her chin slightly. Nonsense. Siena, didn't I warn you before? Today is our engagement banquet. For our sake, my mom canceled all her business in Oreo and flew back especially to attend our banquet. After my father passed away, it was my mother who endured hardships and raised me alone. On such an occasion today, no one is allowed to cause trouble. Otherwise, I won't let them off. My mom will be here later. How do you expect her to react when she sees this scene? Troy was angry. Elena shrunk her head and dared not say another word. Troy was the only chance for her daughter, Siena, to marry into a wealthy family. Okay, Troy, I believe mommy will like me. Siena clung to Troy's arm and acted coquettishly. Elena hurriedly agreed, saying, Troy, Siena is so well-behaved and sensible. How could Mrs. Berg not like her? Troy waved his hand and said, All right, look at what you've done to her. Hurry up and send her to the hospital. Don't you know that this is illegal? Siena spoke up. With you and my mother-in-law here, what kind of trouble can she cause? It's just money business. As long as we give her enough money, she won't cause any trouble. Siena was calling her girlfriends to send me to the hospital. Troy interrupted. Wait a minute. Siena looked puzzled and asked, Honey, what's wrong? Troy lowered his voice, saying, Why does this woman look familiar to me? Where did you bring her from? As he said so, he walked up to me. Chapter 9. After Troy graduated from college, I rarely returned to Lautnert. Most of my time was spent on the company's business. I only called him when I had time, so Troy wasn't as familiar with me as before. Troy squatted in front of me. He whispered, Are you okay? He reached out and combed the strands of hair stuck to my face with blood. Then he wiped the blood off my face with a tissue. My face appeared in front of his eyes. At that moment, I saw Troy's pupils shrink suddenly. He was stunned. Looking at me in disbelief, he was angry. Chapter 9. After Troy graduated from college, I rarely returned to Lautnert. Most of my time was spent on the company's business. I only called him when I had time, so Troy wasn't as familiar with me as before. Troy squatted in front of me. He whispered, Are you okay? He reached out and combed the strands of hair stuck to my face with blood. Then he wiped the blood off my face with a tissue. My face appeared in front of his eyes. At that moment, I saw Troy's pupils shrink suddenly. He was stunned. Looking at me in disbelief, he was angry. Then Troy roared terrifyingly, Mom? In an instant, the whole engagement banquet quieted down. Elena, Siena, her few girlfriends, and others were standing in place in horror with their faces turning pale. Elena was so scared that she sat on the ground, trembling all over. Troy picked me up as if he had gone crazy. Looking terrifyingly gloomy, he shouted in a hoarse voice, Who did it? Siena walked out silently. Trembling, she said to Troy, I'm sorry, Troy. I thought she was the mistress. Get out of here. Troy held me and kicked Siena in the stomach, sending her flying. Then he hugged me and ran outside regardless of everything. To everyone's surprise, Siena's father, JVN Cook, stood up at this moment and stopped Troy. "Troy, where are you going?" "Today is your engagement banquet with Siena. Everyone is here." His words infuriated Troy. Troy cursed. "What a fucking engagement banquet. If something happens to my mom, I'll fucking kill your whole family." Everyone was so scared that they didn't dare to move. Chapter 10. 10 minutes later, Troy took me to a hospital. Then he heard about my injuries from the doctor. Not only was my face disfigured, but my vagina was also stitched up. Troy looked so gloomy. Siena, Elena, Javian, and all of her relatives came to the hospital. "I'm sorry, Troy. It's a misunderstanding. I didn't know she was mommy." Siena pitifully looked at Troy with teary eyes. Elena forced a smile and kept explaining, "Well, why didn't Mrs. Berg say it earlier or give you a call? In that case, these misunderstandings wouldn't have happened." "Troy, calm down. Siena has never seen Mrs. Berg, so she mistook her for the mistress. It is because of the photo you posted on your Facebook account last night that Siena made the wrong judgment. Besides, you also kicked Siena. Let's just let it go and quickly settle our marriage." I sadly closed my eyes. Until now, what the Cook family cared about was the engagement. After all, as long as Siena and Troy signed their each name at the engagement banquet, they would all be in the upper class. I was saddened that Troy had chosen Siena, a malicious woman, among so many girls. They didn't even give me a chance to call Troy. I was tortured by all these demons for a whole day. Marriage? Well, you should think about how to deal with Troy, who is angry next. After his father died, he valued me more than his own life. Without any warning, Troy reached out and grabbed Siena's neck. In a stern tone, he said, "Before, no matter how you caused trouble or made a fuss, it was all fine. Even if you want money, I can give it to you. But you, this bitch, should never have touched my mom." Troy, who learned the whole story from me, was so angry that his whole body was trembling. He was shaking with anger. He stared at Siena tightly, saying, "Do you know that the golden ring you broke today is the heirloom of the Malone family? The torn photo is the only picture of my mom and dad. You tortured and beat a woman until she fainted, stripped her clothes off, and humiliated her all day. That woman is my mom. The marriage? Well, your whole family will never have a good life." Elena said unwillingly, "So what? We all said that we didn't know in advance. And we all were here today to apologize to Mrs. Berg. There is no need to be unreasonable." Troy looked at Elena and said indifferently, "Your apology is trash." Just as he was speaking, several police officers flooded into the ward. At the sight of the police, Siena panicked and looked at Troy with a pale face. "Troy, are you serious?" Chapter 11. When the police arrived at the ward, I saw Elena and Siena were both in a panic. "Mrs. Berg, please listen to me. We didn't mean it. Do you want to prevent Troy and Siena from getting married?" Everyone knew it. This matter was a criminal case. Once I took it seriously, everyone who participated in hitting me would go to jail. I simply ignored these demons and slowly closed my eyes. At this point, even if I don't say anything, Troy will no longer have any contact with Siena. Now, Troy wants to kill Siena. He will never marry her. In this lifetime, Siena can't marry into the Malone family with me around. Siena's family, along with her few close friends, were all taken to the police station. The leading police officer stood in the ward and spoke to me politely. "Mrs. Berg, we have reviewed the surveillance footage from the beauty salon and the engagement banquet. They are suspected of intentionally assaulting others and illegally detaining others. The circumstances are very serious. Now, we also want to investigate the financial losses you have suffered in this matter. If you don't accept a settlement at that time, all of what happened will be taken into consideration by the court for their sentencing." Troy brought the broken pieces of the golden ring that Elena smashed to the front of the police. This golden ring used to be the flagship product of a time-honored jewelry brand. As for whether it is authentic or not, I believe the Judicial Department can verify it. Or I can also take it for a third-party appraisal. The current price of it will not be less than $300 million. There won't be a second one in the whole country. The police officer nodded, made a simple record, and left. I met Siena and her family again a week later. After being hospitalized for a whole week, I could walk again. Siena, Elena, her father, and a few other girlfriends were in the detention center for more than a week. In the mediation room, when they saw me walk in, everyone's eyes were on me. I noticed that Siena's face was pale. She was still wearing the luxurious dress from the engagement banquet. It looked quite expensive. It was just that it hadn't been washed for more than a week, so it was all wrinkled. Everyone sat in their seats in a daze. Siena's girlfriends looked at her with eyes full of hatred. "Mrs. Berg, I'm sorry. Siena instigated us to do all these things. We have nothing to do with this whole thing. It was Siena who told us to tear off your clothes and beat you up. We don't want to go to jail. You can ask us to do anything." I hadn't said anything yet. These people voluntarily admitted to what they did. "Mrs. Berg, look. We have been detained and learn our lesson. There's no need to hold on tightly, right?" Elena looked at me as she spoke in a low voice. Siena tearfully looked at Troy, saying, "Troy, I beg you, for the sake of our relationship, please don't pursue our responsibility, okay? And besides, isn't mother-in-law also at fault? She could have clarified and told me her identity." Siena was shamelessly defending herself. I finally said, "Don't call me mother-in-law. I, Laura Berg, don't have the qualifications to be your mother-in-law yet. I have told you my identity that day, saying that I am not a mistress, but Troy's mother. It's your fault for not listening to me and being more excessive. By the way, the golden ring that your mother, Elena, broke and the property certificate of Blake Bay Villa was originally intended for you." At my words, Elena was stunned. Siena looked at her mother, Elena, resentfully and said, "It's all your fault. I hate you so much." Chapter 12. Elena confronted her, saying, "You ungrateful person. Everything is your fault. You didn't even find out who she was and rushed into the beauty salon with your friends. You have ruined me. You even insulted her as a rude and raw person. I think you are worse than her. How dare you want to marry into a wealthy family?" I was not surprised at all. With Elena with such a personality, it was destined that everyone from the Cook family was selfish. I smiled and said lightly, "By the way, the appraisal result of the golden ring that your mother, Elena, broke has come out. I won't explain its meaning to you. Let's talk about its value. According to the current situation of the jewelry industry in the market, this golden ring is worth at least more than $320 million. I will round it down for you. Compensate me with $300 million. In addition, Troy bought you bags, a house, and a luxury car, and covered your expenses while you were in a relationship with him. It's not all given for nothing. The total value is more than $100 million. These all came with evidence. As for those that without solid evidence, consider them as a gift to you." In front of me, Troy quieted down without saying anything. The Cook family was facing a compensation of $400 million. Siena felt hopeless, saying, "How can I get so much money? Even if I sell myself, I can't come up with it." With a hint of a sob, she looked at Elena and said, "My mother broke the golden ring. It has nothing to do with me. You can't blame me for it." Elena's face turned pale in an instant. "You are an ungrateful person. I did everything for you. If it weren't for your recklessness, could we have been what we are today?" The mother and daughter started arguing in the mediation room. Siena had no hope of marrying into a wealthy family. Siena, who didn't want to shoulder these debts, shouted to cut off the mother-daughter relationship with Elena. I looked at Troy and said, "Did you see? This is your girlfriend, my good daughter-in-law." Troy's face had long turned livid. He looked at Siena with anger in his eyes. Elena kept begging me, saying, "Mrs. Berg, since you are so rich, can't you let it go? How could my family come up with so much money? Besides, we have paid a price. Can't you be more magnanimous? If you feel unsatisfied, you can come and beat me up. Anyway, we don't have money, but we have our lives." They were acting shamelessly. Do they think that I can't do anything to them? I turned to the police officer in charge of mediation and calmly said, I refuse any mediation. Everything should be done according to legal procedures. If there is a need to prosecute, then do it. If they need to go to jail, then do it. And I want all the compensation of $400 million, not a penny less. Elena shouted sharply, "You are extorting us. How much can a broken golden ring be worth? I won't accept it." Even now, they had no remorse at all. I was about to get up and leave. Siena forcefully raised her head and screamed, "I'm pregnant. You can't imprison me." I subconsciously looked at Troy. He also stood still. Chapter 13. Elena seemed to have caught a life straw. She quickly said, "Mrs. Berg, did you hear that? My daughter is pregnant with your family's flesh and blood. The child in her belly is innocent. Even if you are heartless, you can't deny your grandchild, right? If Siena was pregnant, I couldn't imprison her." Siena was sent to the hospital for an examination from the detention center that day. She was indeed pregnant, which was to my surprise. I noticed that Troy didn't show any expression change. On the contrary, he became gloomy and somewhat terrifying. I asked in confusion, "What's wrong, Troy?" Troy hesitated to say something. Then he confessed to me, saying, "Mom, I am a person who pays great attention to safety in that aspect. I am afraid that Siena will forcefully take over with the child in her belly, so I have always been cautious despite that I don't like fooling around outside. Before, whenever I was with Siena, I would always take precautions." Troy had inherited his father's personality since he was young. He never lied in front of me. I closed my eyes. Given what he said, there was only one possible outcome. Before, not only did Siena date Troy, but she might have also been involved with other men. If this child in her belly is yours, I will respect all your choices. If not, I will personally send her whole family to prison. Troy turned around and left. I consulted a top overseas plastic surgery institution. Per them, the scars on my face could be removed by skin transplantation. Unfortunately, the damage caused to me by Siena's family would never be undone. During this period, I had been prepared for it. I had Troy's driver keep a close eye on Siena. Sure enough, after Siena came out, she started transferring her assets. Siena didn't know that she was too young to play such tricks in front of me. All the evidence of her asset transfers had been recorded by the driver, down to every penny. Until now, I finally knew how much money Troy had spent on her in the past 2 or 3 years. There were 3 villas under Siena's name and 5 or 6 luxury cars, not to mention the designer bags, clothes, and watches that Troy bought for her. Even the duplex apartment where her family was currently living was paid for by Troy. Whatever amount of money was spent on them, I would make them spit it all out even if it was just $1. If I couldn't even do this, then I had wasted these years. It was day 5. Troy, who had been missing these days, appeared in front of me. Seeing his expression, I knew it all. I was grateful that Siena, such a vicious woman, never married into the Malone family. Otherwise, Jack wouldn't rest in peace even in the afterlife. Marrying the wrong man ruined a woman's lifetime. Marrying the wrong woman impoverished a lot of future generations. The old saying was solid true. I casually asked, "Have you found out anything?" Troy clenched his fists tightly, saying, "That child in her belly is not mine." Chapter 14. I had been expecting this ending. Troy was extremely angry with a hint of helplessness, saying, when Siena and I were together, she was cheating on me with one of her college classmates. He reached out, sweeping the ashtray on the coffee table and everything else onto the floor. What a despicable couple. I didn't blame Troy. I knew how sad and angry he was better than anyone else. His mother, who was disfigured and humiliated by his future wife for a whole day, ended up in the hospital. The woman he once considered his wife had someone else's child. Child, there are some things that you have to experience. It's better to experience them now than after you get married. If it weren't for this incident, I wouldn't have been able to see the true colors of her whole family. Troy quickly calmed down. He lit a cigarette gloomily, and his face was faintly visible behind the smoke. He was repeatedly deceived and provoked. On him, I almost felt a trace of killing intent. Fearing that Troy would do something stupid, I said, "With the current situation, Elena and the others will spend more than 10 years in prison. I will help you take away all their wealth. I will let them live in poverty for the rest of their lives, which will torture them more than getting them killed. Sometimes, one could make others feel worse than death with many things. This kind of punishment was more direct and effective than killing them. Siena and her family were all after money, and Siena wanted to marry into a wealthy family. Then I would make them poor for a lifetime. They would never be able to turn their lives around. I asked curiously, "What about Siena's lover?" Troy said, "I met him once." After learning about the current situation of Siena's family, he broke up with Siena and cut off all ties. He told me that the only reason he was willing to stay with Siena was because he valued that bitch's generosity. He was willing to return everything given by Siena to me. He begged me to let him go. I nodded. Now Siena was abandoned by everyone. Sitting in jail for her lifetime would be her only ending. The overwhelming debt of $400 million would be pressed on her family for a lifetime. Every penny her family earned in the future would be mine. But I underestimated how shameless Siena was. To reconcile with me, Siena acted as a victim. Claiming herself to be the future boss lady of the Malone Group, she tearfully revealed her own tragic experience online. She pretended to be pitiful, saying that she treated Troy wholeheartedly, but under boredom, Troy kicked her away. With the Malone Group being involved, the reaction and popularity quickly soared. Within 2 or 3 days, it became a trending topic. Regarding what she had done, Siena didn't mention a word. Instead, she showed a pregnancy report in the video. For a while, there was an overwhelming surge of condemnation online towards me and Troy. Countless unaware netizens sympathized with her and pitied her. Her move caused a rapid decline in the reputation of the Malone Group. After Troy found out, he laughed angrily. This woman accused us on the internet. Siena had no idea how powerful the public relations department of the Malone Group was. Just as the video of Siena denouncing me and Troy became a trending topic, a clarification video from Siena's ex-boyfriend appeared online the next day. Her ex-boyfriend presented all the evidence. In the video, he talked about how Siena secretly had an affair with him while she was dating Troy. The surveillance video where Siena and her several girlfriends had beat me up in a beauty salon and insulted me was revealed as well. Faced with solid evidence, Siena was speechless. The netizens instantly turned against her. As the revelation went further, the situation gradually escalated. The public became aware of the fact that they had disfigured me. Besides being angry, everyone was shocked that Siena had done such inhumane things. It was known that they had ruined the property certificate of the Blake Bay Villa and my golden ring. It was originally a gift I intended to give to her when we first met. But Siena's family tore it into pieces rudely. All netizens flocked to Siena's Facebook account and madly insulted her. Even her phone number, address, and ID card were exposed. With the help of some people, large groups of people surrounded Siena's villa every day and threatened her in various means. She, who was afraid to step out of the door, locked herself in a room. Soon, Elena, Siena's father, and her girlfriends were all transferred to the prosecutor's office by the police. I disagreed with any form of mediation. I made it clear that Troy's villa and luxury car, which had been given to Siena's family, had to be returned. There was little suspense in the trial result. All the evidence of Siena's illegal transfer of property was presented in court. As a result, Elena and Siena's father were sentenced to 9 years in prison. Her few girlfriends were sentenced to a minimum of 3 years. With the help of the court, the properties that were transferred by Siena were back in my hands. There wasn't even a handbag left for her. On the day the trial result came out, Siena secretly came to the gate of my villa, kneeling on the ground alone and begging for Troy's forgiveness. "Troy, I know I was wrong. Can you forgive me? I'll go and abort the child. Then we can start over. I know you still have feelings for me. I can't live without you." Siena cried bitterly. Seeing her shameless look, I couldn't help but laugh out loud. Troy stood by a French window on the second floor. Looking at Siena kneeling below, he said coldly, "I want to kill her." Chapter 15. From my understanding of Troy's personality, he would never bother with Siena again in his lifetime. With her glamorous side torn apart, all that was left was filth. Mom, I'm sorry. I didn't expect that a photo I posted on Facebook would cause such great harm to you. Troy looked at the scars on my face with red eyes, full of guilt. If it weren't for me, I couldn't predict what Troy would have done to retaliate against Siena's family. Fortunately, everything was coming to an end. I also wondered, if it weren't for what happened that day, what would happen if this woman, Siena, married into my family in the future? Troy, I have never interfered in your feelings, nor have I looked down upon anyone. I don't care about your future wife. It doesn't matter to me whether she is beautiful or ugly, fat or thin, rich or poor. I only care about her character and whether she is worthy of marrying into the Malone family. Moreover, if you ever find a mistress outside and live a debauched life, I will personally disable you. Troy smiled bitterly. He finally understood what a great mistake he had made. Later, I sent someone to investigate Siena's situation a few times. After all the property Troy gave her was recovered by the court, she had nothing. She wanted to go find her old lover to support her. But her old lover didn't owe her any favors. In the end, she was beaten up at the doorstep of his house. Siena, do you want to kill me? You slut. That's Mrs. Berg and Troy from the Malone group. Don't you see what you have done? I didn't even know anything until the video was exposed online. You took your friends to the beauty salon, beat up Troy's mother, and mistook her as the mistress. Besides stripping off her clothes, you also ruined her appearance. If it were me, if you dare to treat my mother like this, I would never forgive you even if I had to kill you. Get out of here immediately. Who knows whose illegitimate kid is in your belly? Siena's old lover didn't give her any face as he publicly humiliated her. It was just like she had once humiliated me. I didn't know if Siena felt the same way as me at that time. As the incident online continued to go viral, Siena's reputation was deteriorating. Everyone avoided her, fearing that they would get into trouble or end up being a scapegoat. Desperate, Siena could only rent a room in a dilapidated neighborhood and live in poverty. I knew that I would never get back $400 million. Her whole family would never be able to pay my money back however hard they tried. The dream of her marrying into a wealthy family was shattered. For Siena, it was no different from her punishment and killing her. During that time, she tried several times to threaten Troy and force him to meet her by threatening to jump off a building. But her wish was in vain. Without me saying anything, Troy wouldn't spare her a second glance. 1 year later, Siena gave birth to a child and went to find her old lover with the child. She couldn't even support herself now. If she didn't find a man, both of them would have to be starved to death. According to the information I received, Siena's old lover took the child to the hospital for a blood test. The final report surprised me. That child wasn't her old lover's. As for whose child it was, perhaps only Siena knew it the best in her heart.